be led by Fire Chief John Fontenot, and the invocation will be given by Councilmember Dan Kirkley.
Join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Under the Texas flag, I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
Father, we approach the throne of grace this evening and ask that, Father, in all we say and all we do, it will be because we choose to be the servants you've called us to be. That the love we express in this service is unconditional. And that, Father, every single thing we say and every thought we have would honor you in all we say and do. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. We call this meeting officially to order. First item on the agenda is public comments. Citizens who desire to address the council on any matter may register to do so prior to the meeting and speak during this time. Forms are located outside on the south entrance. Please understand that while the council appreciates hearing your comments, state law prohibits them from engaging in discussion other than providing a statement of specific factual information or reciting existing city policy and taking action other than directing staff to place the matter on a future agenda. I think today we have one person who signed up to speak. Tina Hedrington. If you would come up and use the microphone and tell us your name and address, please, ma'am.
Sure. Good evening. My
Ma'am,
name,
one point, just
Yes,
let me make, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
yes, sir.
we do have a 3-minute time limit, and at about
Yes, sir.
15 seconds short of that, Mr. Pearson here will kind of wave at you and let
Yes,
you
sir.
know.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, a good evening, councilmen and councilwomen. My name is Tina Hedrington. I am from Little Rock, Arkansas. I came here by way of, I'm a retired military veteran. I served 11 years in the Army. So I'm just gonna get straight to the point. Again, my name is Tina Hedrington. I live at 709 South Amy Lane, apartment number A as in Alpha, Harker Heights, Texas, 76548. During the past 6 months, it's seeming that it's been, and I'm sorry for closing my eyes, but that's how I think. It's been a, I'm gonna say a vendetta. I don't know what it is, Councilman, but that address was used. I do ministry work for the Lord. I am a Christian, a woman of faith. And I have friends that are incarcerated. I have friends that are on drugs. I have friends that are Christians. I have all caliber of friends. So somewhere along the line here, and I don't want to take up too much time because I know I'm limited, that particular address has caused a major catastrophe for my entire life, which includes my son that's currently detained in the Bell County Infirmary, where he has been I'm thinking things are getting lighter at the end of the tunnel, but before they got lighter, as a concerned parent, he's had unhealthy conditions in there. He's is zero integrity, the abuse, neglect, unsafe conditions. It's been a lot of things going on, and I don't think it's Bell County. The deputies have been very nice and kind to me, but it's the medical staff, WellPath, that one of the ladies, and I know as time is moving, I just was speaking to her and visiting. And I'm kind of jumping. Wait a minute. I want to get back to my address. 709 South Amy Lane, apartment number A. That address was used to write, I'm not going to call names, but people that, like I said, were incarcerated in the Bell County facility. And after that encounter of me believing that everybody is not going to be filled with the Holy Spirit of God, everybody, if they want it, they can get it. But if you don't, I can't be responsible for your acts that you carry on, no matter who you are. You could be my mother. I'm for what's right. But as a 59-year-old senior citizen, independent, very strong-minded woman that loves her son. I've lost one son. I'm from Arkansas, but I just want to see, I just wanted to give a comment basically about this address. So I don't know what the Texas rules and the laws are for us, like harassment, it's mental anguish. I mean, if I open my door, it's just like flies. And if I go somewhere, it's flies. If I go somewhere, people's cell phones. So I'm trying to see, is it something that I'm missing around here? Because I'm gonna just be honest with you. I'm living from paycheck to paycheck. So I don't know what this whole matter is, sir. And I'm sorry if I went out of line somewhere.
Well, thank you, Ms. Edrington. I'm sorry for the problems you're having. Actually, that sounds like a matter that would be better addressed to Bell County rather than the city of Belton, since we would have no jurisdiction, but
Yes.
certainly we wish you the best of luck with
Thank
your
you, sir.
situation.
Thank you for letting.
Thank
me
you,
share.
ma'am.
Thank you, sir.
All right, items 3 and 4 on the consent agenda and may be adopted by one motion. If any council member wishes to pull either one and consider them separately, you're welcome to do so. Item 3, to consider minutes of the June 14th, 2022 city council meeting. And item 4, to consider an amendment to the interlocal agreement with Belton Independent School District for the School Resource Officer Program to add an additional school resource officer. Anyone wish to pull those or discuss those?
I move we approve the consent agenda items 3 and 4.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say no. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Item 5 in planning and zoning is to hold a public hearing and consider a zoning change from agricultural to planned development for a multiple family district on approximately 18.168 acres located at 5890 Toll Bridge Road. Tina Moore, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hi, council members. Hope everyone is well. Okay, this property is located just east of I-35 and just west of Old Toll Bridge Road. So here is the property. It is south of Shanklin Lane and also north of the Lampasas River. Here's a zoomed in look at the property. As you can see, it's developed with a detached single-family residential. Here is the zoning for this property is zoned agricultural, as is the property east of the lot. Property west of the lots, property south of the lot is zoned single family 1, and it's developed as a detached home. The properties north of the lot is zoned commercial highway, and also the adjacent property is on PD commercial highway, and that's developed for an RV park with 100 rental spaces and a clubhouse. The applicant requested the zoning change to allow for a planned development, multiple family residential district to allow for development of a duplex style apartment complex, which would offer market rate 3-bedroom units for rent. The site consists of 18 acres, proposes 95 2-story duplex, that's 190 units, a leasing office, amenity center, and 2 small parks. The applicant is requesting the planned development district to allow for the use and also to accommodate setback reductions. Before we get into the zoning details, this is a critical zoning decision. This is the first property that will tie into the newly constructed South Belton water and wastewater line. The sewer capacity study, which was conducted by Half Associates in 2016, anticipated commercial developments along this corridor. That includes retail, restaurants, office type uses. And that's between the corridor between I-35 and Toll Bridge Road. The study led to the newly constructed sewer line and nearly constructed lift station. This proposed development is a higher density than what was anticipated and requires more capacity than the system was allocated for the development. While there are no other users on this newly constructed sewer line, this increased density will have impact for future developments along this corridor. The increasing the sewer capacity in this area is not feasible, and it comes with a hefty price tag that will be passed down to the citizens of Belton. If approved, a reanalysis is required. The applicant is aware of this and has agreed to participate in the cost share. Here is a map of this critical area. Again, the area between Toll Bridge and I-35 was anticipated for commercial development with a lesser sewer capacity than what the applicant is proposing. Along there, as you can see, there are other major tracks that also needs to be developed, and they will also tie into this newly constructed sewer line. With that, the sewer line was carefully reviewed by the city council based on the future-oriented densities that were proposed. Again, this was proposed for a lesser density. The area east of Toll Bridge was proposed for single-family 1 type density as well. With that, I think the major question is, how does the city council want to see this corridor developed? Is this development that's proposed the highest and best use for this site? All right, so here is what is being proposed. The development that consists of 190 units. Access to this development would be from the frontage road on 35 and also one off of Toll Bridge. With that, the applicant is requesting a reduction in setback from the side property line. Our code requires a 60-foot separation when a multifamily lot is adjacent to a single-family residential zoning. So they're requesting, instead of 60, a 40-foot side yard setback on that southern property line. In addition, the distance between the apartments, our code requires a 15-foot separation. If there are openings, the applicant is proposing a 10-foot separation. This is similar to single-family 5, which requires single-family 3, which requires a 5-foot side yard setback. All right, according to our off-street parking standards, apartment complex with 3 bedrooms are required to have 2.5 parking spaces. Staff believe this is similar to single-family duplex type development. We believe that 4 parking spaces should be required, and that's 2 in the garage and 2 driveways parking spaces for maneuvering and for stacking on the property. The applicant disagrees. They believe that because this is a private development and all the streets are internal, it should be regulated like the apartment complex to allow for 2.5. Staff and the applicant worked on a compromise agreement that will allow for 3 parking spaces at each of the duplexes and also 20 visitors parking spaces around the amenity center and also around the park. The Planning and Zoning Commission approved of the 590 parking spaces that's proposed. All right. For the elevation provided, all dwelling units will have a masonry veneer on the first floor, a hardy plank on the second floor. As this is a highly visible I-35 corridor, staff believe that it meets the city building design requirements. That is for 90% masonry on the first floor and 75% on the second floor. The Planning and Zoning Commission recommended against meeting this design. However, they did not provide any conditions to establish what kind of exterior this property should have. But that, again, staff believes that it should meet our city established design criteria for masonry exterior. This is what the applicant is proposing for the boundary fence. It will consist of a concrete material around the property, and that is an example of the sign that they are also proposing. For allowable land use, this property zoning change will allow for the duplex apartment as shown on the site plan. And for area and setback requirements, this lot exceeds our requirements as far as a minimal lot size is over 18 acres. The future land use map identifies this as a commercial corridor, which may permit multifamily development. Again, just a caution that even though the future land use map allows this, the sewer capacity study requires a lesser density. Notices were provided to property owners within 200 feet of the property. We only received 1 letter back from the applicant approving it. Again, staff has reservations about approving the zoning change because of the sewer capacity study. The area appears to be better suited for commercial development due to proximity to I-35. We continue to feel like this land use decision is critical and the proposal is inappropriate. At their meeting on June 21st, the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval with a vote of 5-2. So the real question is whether or not City Council thinks this is the best and highest use for this property. If you do, staff recommends the following conditions. The development must comply with all applicable uses in the attached site plan and to the multifamily zoning district. A side yard setback, I apologize, there's more to that, must adhere to the requirements of the City of Belton design standards for a building design standard. A side yard setback of 40 is allowed along the southern property line. A reduction of the separation between buildings that have an open to 10 feet instead of 15 is allowed. A minimum of 590 parking spaces shall be provided. A one lot subdivision plat is required. The applicant has agreed to cost share in the reanalysis of the sewer basin at a cost not to exceed $15,000. Development of the site shall conform to type 2 design standards. Again, that includes building design standards, landscape design standards, tree protection, preservation mitigation standards, fence and wall and screening standards. With that, I will be happy to answer any questions that you have. The applicant's representative are also here and can address questions that you have.
Okay, at this time, we will open the public hearing. If anyone wishes to speak for or against this proposal, please come up and tell us your name. Hearing none, I'll close the public hearing and open it up for council comment. Questions?
It seems to me that this is a very important decision. We designed a whole sewer and water system at great cost to our citizens. And it was not based on this density. You could say, well, let's go ahead and rezone it and then we'll sort it out between now and improving of the site plan and the plan. But that doesn't seem prudent to me in this case. I think the zoning is really the decision point. And until we have that sewer analysis in our hands, I don't think it's prudent to make that decision. I candidly have considerable concern that this is not highest and best use, nor will that support the sewer design we've just spent millions and millions of dollars. So my thought would be to postpone this until we get the sewer design, because that, if it says no, or that if it says yes, but you've got no additional capacity left for the rest of that whole basin, then I don't think we can approve that rezoning. And that's not in keeping with our future land use plan, which was the basis for all of this. And so it's not an illogical decision, although it's a difficult decision. But we don't have all the data yet. So my recommendation, and I'll not make a motion because I want you all to have an opportunity to speak, is that we would postpone this until we at least get the sewer analysis back.
And my default is kind of the future land use map, and infrastructure is years of planning and funding and partnering and putting that in place for commercial or single family. To see the density that's being proposed concerns me. I'm also a stickler, honestly, for parking, and to see that we're 760 parking spaces are required, and we're only doing 78% of that. I just feel like long-term, those don't work out very well, especially in a rental situation. That's always seems to be an issue down the road. And so another concern, and there was a comment about the internal streets that you made, and I didn't quite understand that comment.
The streets that are proposed inside the area are going to be private streets. They're not going to be a city maintained street. So that's what that refers to. And they have control over that as part of their HOA. They can, their leasing agent can manage that, no parking on the street. They have control over that as opposed to the city.
Yeah, but back to limited parking, I just don't know how you get around a parking requirement. And we've seen studies and we've monitored it, and if you don't have the correct number of spaces, it just kind of downgrades. And the other thing, just personal, gateway to our city, gateway to our community, and we were hoping for commercial single family with less density, less stress and strain on our infrastructure and sewer. And so I think that's pretty important. My concerns.
I would agree. I think my sticking point is the future land use map that we've spent a lot of time setting vision for, and really more so than that, the investment we've made and the infrastructure based upon that seems a bit irresponsible on our part to not look further into what this might do to that. With that kind of change to the vision and the plan we've put in place and already made taxpayer dollar investments to move toward that goal. I, along with Craig and Second John too, would want to see a little more information. And it's a concerning shift from what we've planned, but I know that that's part of what we do as well. But I think that's a pretty concerning shift from our original vision for the area.
I think my comment would be, I think we all have concerns about density, about the sewer. But I think also as we look at the future land use and the use of the property, my opinion is I'm not sure it's fair to the potential developers to prolong the decision and to wait until we have additional information, because to me, I don't, and you know, I'm the positive kind of guy, but I just don't think the project is what belongs there.
Well, I agree. The original discussion about this, both from us and from the proposed developer, was commercial. And that's really what we were hoping. That's really what we planned for. That's really, in my opinion, the highest and best use of that property.
Absolutely.
And I don't feel good about what's been presented. Not that y'all are not capable of doing a great project. I'm not trying to belittle your project, but I don't think that's the right place for it. And to me, that's the bottom line. Is it the right place for this? I don't think it's the highest and best use of that land, as Mr. Kirkley just said. I would entertain a motion. Craig, you wish to postpone it, or do you want to make that motion? Or
I'm going to defer and see what my fellow council members think.
Mayor, if I could make a comment too before you all vote.
I'm sorry.
As we presented to you tonight, this is a really critical land use decision, one that carries with it not only the decision for this piece of property, but for other properties in the area. It's a precedent-setting type issue. We've already entertained other requests for multifamily development in this corridor. I think the decision the council makes tonight is critical to helping guide us in terms of discussions with property owners about what is to occur in this corridor. While the land use plan says it may permit that type of development, the sewer system just can't handle it. Even if we do the study that has been proposed, we've had discussions with Half and Associates. We've talked to the property owner about participating, and they have agreed to share some costs in that. But there's no fix. There is no fix right now for it. The council spent a lot of time and analysis and planning and $8 million in getting all the utilities down into this area for the purposes that have been identified. And for us to, with one of the very first zoning changes, come back and change the concept of what can be handled here is certainly lacking in prudence, and certainly in my opinion. The situation is such that we just can't see why this is an appropriate decision right now. A tabling or deferral would imply that there's a solution at the other end. We really won't know if there's a solution at the other end until we get a lot of development in the corridor. And certainly there might be some exchange, you might get some industrial development where residential was anticipated. And so years down the line, there might be some accommodation. But right now, at the front end, when we haven't flushed one toilet, we're at a time where it's just not timely to make this kind of a land use decision, contrary to the sewer system study that's been done.
thank you, Mr. Listy. Any other comments, or is there a motion?
I move we would disapprove agenda item number 5 based on the city's recommendation and in conjunction with the future land use map.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to deny item number 5 for a zoning change. All those who wish to vote to deny that, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say no. Motion passes unanimously. Certainly entertain a different type of development that more closely fits what we've been trying to do with that great investment that we were talking about.
And Mayor, we said a couple of times we had hoped it would be, but more than that, we planned and we resourced for it to be
Exactly.
not multifamily. That's the problem.
We obviously have a very limited frontage on I-35, and we've got to be extremely careful about how we let that develop. Item number 6 is to hold a public hearing and consider a zoning change from agricultural to mobile home district on approximately 6.422 acres located at 2061 Circle Oak Loop. Ms. Moore, this is an item that we've asked to postpone, so
That is correct. The Planning and Zoning Commission postponed the item, and we also recommend that this item be postponed.
okay, we'll need a motion to postpone this, and I think they've asked for a July 26th date, so I would
Yes, sir.
entertain a motion.
So moved.
So we have a motion and a second to postpone this until the July 26th meeting. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. The motion passes unanimously. Item number 7, to hold a public hearing and consider a zoning change from Plan Development Single Family 1 zoning district to Plan Development Single Family 1 zoning district with a specific use permit for an accessory dwelling unit on approximately 0.928 acres located at 517 East 25th Avenue. Ms. Moore.
This will be a little bit of deja vu because we keep looking at this property for a zoning change. This property is located east of the HEB. It is in the Guest Delaney subdivision just off of East 25th. You might recall from last year, we did a PD to allow for an alternative roof, a flat roof at that location. So that is the property. Here's a zoomed in look. As you can see, this property is developed with a detached single family home at the present. The zoning for the property is zone PD, single family 1. Surrounding zonings are also PD or just plain single family 1. There's also the Heritage Park that is around this area. The applicant is proposing to remodel the existing home into 2 separate living quarters with the kitchen in both sections. ADU with a kitchen is allowed in the single family 1 zoning district as long as an SUP is approved and is incidental to the main dwelling unit. All right, you might remember in 2018, you approved a lot of conditions for ADU. This property, most of it is conforming. The only thing is the size of the property. Again, this is a retrofit. This is an existing house, and they're remodeling the existing space into 2 dwelling units. And so the lot meets the zoning requirement as single family 1. They're proposing 1 ADU. The lot size exceeds the 5,000 square foot. Size of the ADU is 1550. Again, the main structure that's being retrofitted is 3,400 plus square feet. The maximum height will not exceed the single family requirement for 2.5 story. Building setback is already existing. They're not building outside of the current building envelope. Requirement for 1 additional parking spaces, they're proposing 2-car garage at this ADU. Again, this is an existing development. The lot coverage, this is a larger lot size than typical. It exceeds that 60%. Building material, the applicant is remodeling the existing building that has a brick exterior. And they will keep that brick exterior. This is a platted lot. Water, sewer, and electric services will all be connected to the main house. ADU will not be sold separately, be sold as part of the entire property with the main dwelling. So here's a survey of the existing home. The applicant is again separating the 2 into 2 different living area. So here is that second proposal, 2-car garage. They're gonna have a hallway that will be connected by a breezeway. There's also going to be a little courtyard in the front where he'll have that fence off for a little bit of privacy. Here is the exterior of the building, have a brick exterior, 4-car garage, 2 for each of the dwelling units. For an SGP, there are certain criteria that it needs to meet. Is harmonious and compatible with the surrounding uses. The adjacent property are all going to be developed as a single-family detached home. This ADU is allowed in the single-family detached home district as long as it's limited to one. Activities requested by the applicant is normally associated with the requested use. Yes, an ADU with a second kitchen is allowed with an SUP, and it must comply with the adopted standards as we just went over. Has an impact to the surrounding area been mitigated? There are no visible impact to the surrounding area. Notices were provided to property owners within 200 feet of the property, and we received no letter of opposition or support. The Planning and Zoning Commission heard this item at their meeting on the 21st and recommended approval of this item. The use of it will conform to the single-family one district. In addition, an SUP authorizing the accessory dwelling unit with a kitchen, subject to the ordinance 2018-36 that per the attached site plan and elevation and the interior floor plans is recommended for approval. I will be happy to answer any questions that you have. The applicant is also here and can answer questions. Mr. Larry Guess.
Okay, thank you, Tina. At this time, we'll open the public hearing and consider a zone change from plan development. Does anyone wish to speak for or against this proposal? Hearing none, we will close the public hearing and turn it over to council for consideration.
Tina, I had a couple questions. In looking over this, I couldn't find the square footage of the main dwelling. I see what it will approximately be after some change and whatnot.
I want to say it was 1650-ish
1650
of
is what it is
the
now.
main dwelling. And please introduce yourself and address.
Larry Guess, 504 Mitchell in Belton. It's 3,400 originally. 3,440. But it's important to know that this house was built in two stages. There was the original house, which is one part of the dwelling that we're proposing now. And then some years, this was built in the 70s. And then some years after that, they literally just built another dwelling beside it and connected it with a hallway. But the second dwelling had everything but a kitchen. And so my buyer asked if we could construct an ADU because he wanted a mother-in-law suite. And I said, well, we can if I can get a permit, which I did, but now we're having to go back and talk about it. So I can answer any questions about that if you want.
I feel like I should add on to that. So the original is over 3,000, but with the new proposal, the main structure part of it will be around 1650.
They're about 16 each.
16 each for both
I guess
sides.
that's where I'm confused because the ADU that we originally set up was supposed to be
60%.
800 square feet or 80%. And we went through several of those and kind of designed as a smaller assisted living type thing for an elderly parent and something, and smaller, less intrusive, and I think we're missing the spirit there, a little bit of that.
It is, but in the spirit, this is also a retrofit. This is already an existing structure that's already there, that they're just making some changes to it.
And do I understand correctly, the structural addition is primarily kitchen?
Yeah, basically, that's the only change we're making. We've done a little interior
Right.
space changing, but really the significant thing is adding a kitchen to
Gotcha.
the second area.
Yeah.
It already has,
I don't know.
both units have 2-car garages.
Right. And I don't know if everybody's familiar with that. I've been in it several times. And it's a little confusing if you don't do something like you're doing. And
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
I
what
mean,
you're
it's,
doing
yeah,
is a good
it
idea.
really is the best and highest use of.
And I agree with John, though, that it's a little bit different from what our ADU was for. And I don't know that we need to relook it because I think this is just one of those unique applications. I mean, where else do you have two houses built together constructed by hallway? So I agree, but in this case, the houses are already there. And it's not going to be unsightly or
No, we haven't
From the road,
changed,
but-
other than putting new windows in the entire house. We haven't changed the structure
I think
at all.
this is an appropriate thing to do, in my humble opinion.
I think my question or maybe my initial thought is it seems to be setting up to become a duplex more so than an ADU for a single owner.
Well, that would
And
require
It sure would. So
another
that's
whole.
Why I'm asking that's not what we're trying to.
No, we're
get
just,
to, and-
I'm trying to please the buyer.
And the real, I think, key point is zoning doesn't just stay with the current owner.
Mhm.
And
Oh,
so-
yeah, of
so
course.
That lasts forever. And so if the house is sold and it's kind of set up as a duplex, with two equal sides and not a smaller
But if
ADU.
it's a PD, John, it can't. It has to come back to us. And that's
Yeah,
what it is.
I mean, it can't be anything other than you approve it to be.
I understand, but
Yeah.
it does kind of look like a duplex, to be honest.
Tina, remind me.
Well, it looks exactly like it did when we got it.
But it's not gonna be 80% of the main dwelling when you're finished.
No, I mean,
Not
it's not
close.
meeting, no, it's not meeting the 800 square foot.
Right.
uh,
Can
requirement.
you remind me the kitchen pieces of that ordinance? If I recall during some of the ADU presentations we experienced, there was something to the fact that it couldn't be a full, a full-on kitchen. There, it was more of a portable, not portable, but not a fully installed, equipped kitchen.
I apologize. That ordinance change was a little before my time, and
Okay.
just looking at the ordinance, it does not mention that.
It can be a fully equipped kitchen for the ADU.
It can be.
Let me re-ask my question. I guess when I said the difference is going to be we're having a kitchen. Are you adding any square footage to the structure?
No,
That's what I thought. Thank you.
No.
So you're simply saying, please let me do a kitchen.
yeah, basically.
Thank you.
Big kitchen.
If it becomes a duplex, again, I just feel like that's what your owner may be trying to get set up to do, which would be multifamily. That will have to come back.
Well, my thought would be if anyone else appears before this council with another request, it probably wouldn't be granted.
No.
And I have no knowledge of that, of course, but I mean, you're right. It can only be what you approve. So it can't go from one thing to the other without another process.
There are two other aspects that would be required to be sold separately. Certainly you could be operated as two different dwelling units, but to be sold separately, it would have to come back for a replat.
Right.
a
Exactly.
Platting of the property into two.
Right.
Second thing is for it to be two independent dwelling units, it would have to have a fire rated wall between it. And so there's a building code provision as well. So there are a couple of mechanisms.
And
now,
utilities.
And right now it's all one.
It's all
utility
one.
service, Right.
it's all-
So
we-
now, could we miss that at some point in time in the future? That's certainly possible, but technically, there are those three elements that would be required for it to be legally separated as a separate dwelling unit. Platting, building code requirement, and separate utilities.
And I was more concerned about size. I mean, in keeping with what we'd set up for, assisted living, small, minimal. And now it's like, we kind of lost that. And we went round and round with
We
a couple
did.
of these, for a long time to make sure that that was correct and well designed, and well thought out.
Well, my comment, I wouldn't have built that big a second unit if I were actually constructing it, but
That's
it's
what I'm
already
saying.
there. So we're just trying to make the best use of it.
My initial reaction when I read it was this is a backdoor way to get a duplex. But when I read about the strangeness or the uniqueness, I guess I should say, of the unit itself, the way it was built and it strung together with an accompanying hall, I do feel a little bit better into what Mr. Listy said, that it would have to come back to us if there were
Absolutely.
any changes. That would be the only way that I would feel good about it, because as John just talked about, we spent a lot of time trying to work through the ADU idea and the idea that it was a much smaller unit and it was set up for a particular purpose. And this doesn't fit any of those
Yeah.
seen scenarios in my mind, but I understand. it is a
Dan has been in the
strange
house
situation.
and he knows how, I mean, it literally
I've
is
been in it many
already,
times.
it's two
I've been in it
houses.
many times. It's-
You know
it's
exactly how
interesting.
it's set
I do.
up. Yeah, it's literally two houses. So anyway, any other questions?
Thank you, Larry. Any other comments or questions, or do I hear a motion either
Can I
way?
clarify one more point?
Sure.
So it's a PD, so this is unique in itself, correct? Special
Mm-hmm.
use permit? But
Plan-
are all the
plan development.
is this how we would approve all ADUs?
Not
Because I don't want to
usually.
set a
No.
precedent.
Not usually. ADU
this
just
C-
requires an SUP, but because this is already zoned as a PD for the roof requirement, that's why the PD is attached to that. But all
Just don't wanna
ADU
set a-
require an
Yeah,
SUP.
yeah.
And one of the things that helps me, a couple of things. One is we're not adding any structure. We're not adding 800 square feet. Plus, we've got 3 triggers. If somebody chose to use that as a duplex in a rental unit, that would come back to us and we could do that. I think in light of that,
I
I'm
mean, probably
comfortable.
we never know, but you're right.
I'm comfortable making the motion that we approve item 6 as presented
Second.
Wait, that's item 7.
with
Item 7.
Item seven.
item 7. Yes, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I skipped it. Yes.
Okay, we have a motion to approve item 7. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Have a motion and second to approve item 7 with the constraints as outlined by Mr. Listy earlier. All
Motion,
those in
discussion.
favor of
Wait a minute.
approving that?
Wait.
Could I just ask a question?
Certainly.
I've mentioned those comments, but those items are not in the ordinance. Would you like to add a condition to the ordinance that would just say, no division of the property may occur without subdivision plating, building code requirements, and separation of utilities?
I personally would. I don't know
Yes.
about the
That-
other council
If
members.
that gives some comfort to
Modify
you
your
all, then
motion.
that would
Okay.
be a condition for the PD.
So modified.
Second.
I'd feel much better with those additions. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving item 7, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no.
No,
Okay, motion passes 3-2.
Could I request a little increase in volume in Sam's mic, please?
That might help.
Okay, item 8 is, I'll read it and then we'll,
Larry, you always bring the fun ones, man.
item 8, hold a public hearing, consider a zoning change from agricultural to planned development, commercial on approximately 15.836 acres at 2406 Lake Road, generally located west of FM 2271 and east of Sparta Road to establish an RV park. The P and Z voted 5-2 to recommend disapproval of this item. Therefore, it could not be approved by this council without a supermajority, and we do not have enough folks here tonight to have a supermajority anyway. So I would think that we probably need to postpone this until the next council meeting.
I move we postpone it to July 12th.
Second.
2022.
Have a motion and a second to postpone that item. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, please say no. Motion passes unanimously. That item is postponed until the first meeting in July.
I do apologize for the delay.
Yes. Sorry.
Let's see, item number 9, I believe. Hold a public hearing and consider a zoning change from heavy industrial to heavy industrial with specific use permit for the placement of an electronic changeable sign on approximately 0.269 acres located at the northeast intersection of East Sixth Avenue and Taylor's Valley Road and described as Belton Terrace Edition, Block 2, Lot 1. Ms. Moore, again.
And thank you, Mr. Mayor. This property is east of I-35. It's on FM 93 or East Sixth Avenue, and it is at the northeast corner of the Taylor Valley intersection. Here's a zoomed in look. As you can see, it's developed with a billboard. Property is zoned heavy industrial. The surrounding property also zoned the same across the road off of 93, just west of that is commercial property where Chefco is, and McDonald's are zone commercial. The applicant is requesting to replace an existing billboard sign with the electronic changeable copy message sign. The existing illuminated sign is approximately 240 square feet. Total height of that is 35 feet tall. So here is a picture of the current sign. We have a very limited electronic changeable copy. You might remember this from the church one, and that has been added to the list. The Crossville Church, they were approved to allow for 150 square feet of changeable copy and a 50 square feet of static sign. Recently, we adopted provisions in our sign code, section 38.5D, that adopted lighting standards for these type of signs. If approved, these standards will be applicable to the sign. The billboard signs are allowed in a heavy industrial zoning district. Sign requirements for off-premise signs, they are allowed a maximum of 672 square feet and a maximum height of 42.5 feet. Notices were sent out to property owners within 200 feet of the property, and we received no letters of support or opposition for this zoning change. The Planning and Zoning Commission heard this item at their meeting on the 21st, and they recommended approval of the requested zoning change. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. The applicant is also here and can address any questions that you have.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. This time we'll open a public hearing. If anyone wishes to speak for or against this item, please come forward. Give us your name and address, please, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. My name is Matt Nagley. I live at 3501 Canyon Heights Road in Belton, Texas. And we're pretty excited about this, and we appreciate you guys taking a look at it tonight. Just very quickly, our advertisers love the digital signs because they don't have to spend money on a vinyl and to have them changed out. They can have multiple messages, with no additional charge. Our landowners love the digital billboards because they get a big raise in their annual rent. We've done, I think we've been, pretty good community partners in the past in running, a lot of PSAs and, actually I have a list of all the stuff we've done, even from the beginning of the year. Some examples would be AUSA, Belton Chamber of Commerce, the City of Belton, the Turtle Fest, Foster Love, Belton Police Department. We've done some stuff with them as well. The capital investment is huge. They're on the top. I mean, they always look good. We maintain them every time. I have 2 full-time employees that are not only electricians, but all they do is work on digital signs, or at least they're on call to do it. They hang vinyls as well. And so, sorry, I have frogs. All the money on these glasses and my voice doesn't work. But anyway, other than that, I'm just here for any questions. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your being here. This time anyone else wish to speak for or against this? If not, this time we'll close the public hearing and open it for council discussion.
Well, in the past, I have not been a big proponent of digital signs, especially on major corridors, but considering that this is right next to a Superfund site, also industrial area, and very limited, no homes. And they do an amazing job with public service announcements and community posts that really do enhance our community. And I would like to give one heed of warning: the closer you get to town housing or Old Belton, the tougher these signs, from my perspective, will get. So I'm not digging in too much tonight next to the Superfund site. So thanks for all you do, Matt. I think you've been working on this for years, and I think it's time to throw one out up on the country road.
And I think that they also adhere to TxDOT regulations. I mean, it's pretty regulated. So I think it's a great location. I sat there for 6 minutes today coming to the meeting. And it'll be a great location to be able to share some great news from advertisers. And again, I thank you for the partnership you have given for years to the City of Belton, the Chamber, and local nonprofits. So we appreciate it. With that, I'll make a motion unless somebody else wants to say something.
I just wanted to say thank you to staff for explaining how this fits into the scenic cities that we try to maintain, and that we're doing it right.
Yeah,
So
good
please go
job.
ahead.
Well, I'd like to make a motion to approve agenda item number 9 as presented.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, and we appreciate you being here, Mr. Negley. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. I hear none. Motion passes unanimously. Look forward to some great public service announcements and make sure it says Go Big Red from time to time. All right.
Thanks, Matt.
Item 10, to consider a final plat for the preserve at Nolan Creek comprising 2.841 acres located at 710 Shine Street, south of West 8th Avenue and north of West 7th Avenue. Ms. Moore, one more time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, so you might remember this plat too, deja vu. We did a zoning case on this last year in May. Now they're platting that for multifamily development. So the location is off of Shine Street on the west side of the roadway. It's south of Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue. What they're proposing is to consolidate the two lots into one. So it's a one block, one lot subdivision comprising 2.841 acres. Again, the zone for multi-family development, they're proposing to do apartment complex. With that, here is the proposed development. Water and sewer will be provided by the city of Belton. They will need to provide some offsite improvements to connect to the wastewater line, and that will require an easement through UMHB property to allow for that extension. That is part of the conditions of approval that's in the staff memo that's attached. Access to this will be two means of access off of Shine Street. Here's the first access and second access. Right away, Shine Street is a local street which requires 50 feet of right of way, 31 feet of pavement, curb and gutter. The applicant is dedicating a 5-foot right of way for that's attached with the plat. Developer is required to participate in upgrades to Shine Street. The pavement currently there is not. Apologize, lost my note. Does not meet the 30 feet requirement. The applicant is required to bring that pavement up to 31 feet that is required. Or half of 31 from their section. Apologize for that. Drainage, the final drainage will be reviewed with the submittal of the construction plans. Parkland, the applicant has submitted a variance request to allow for an alternative compensation for the proposed private park. Amenities that are proposed include a decking, dog park, park bench, grills, and a walking path. Total of the proposed improvements are approximately $56,000, which exceeds the required parkland fee of $9,600. So here is the proposed park. There's an elevated deck. There are some walking path. There's a dog park that's also shown. And here are where the park benches will be for the development. The Planning and Zoning Commission heard this item at their meeting on the 21st, and they recommended approval of the final plat and approval of the alternative parkland compensation to allow for the private improvements in lieu of parkland dedication or fee, and also condition of staff comment letter dated June 15th. With that, I'll be happy to answer questions that you have. Also, the applicant, Lena Chate, is here if you have any questions for her.
Thank you very much, Tina. And this does not require a public hearing, but questions or comments from the council?
I'm just curious, will the redo of the street, will that require, or will we curb and gutter?
Yes,
Since
sir,
it's
that
not there
normally,
now?
yes, sir, that normally would require a curb and gutter.
And they're okay with their half of the expense associated with expanding it? Good, that'll be a nice addition. Looks really nice. Thanks for doing the park and all the other expense, and what a neat project.
Other questions, comments from council? I think this is a really neat project. Lena, I appreciate, this is the kind of quality infill that we've talked about for years. And I think it's an exciting project in a great location, convenient to the university, convenient to the downtown entertainment business district that we're working on developing. So go forth and do good things. Do I hear a motion?
I move we approve agenda item number 10 as presented.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve item number 10. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. I hear none. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Item number 11, to hold a public hearing, consider approval of an amendment to the Belton Thoroughfare Plan related to South Toll Bridge Road from the Lampasas River to Elmer King Road. And Mr. Van Til is going to give us a report on that.
Yes,
Thank you,
sir.
Bob.
Thank you very much. Mayor, Council, we're going to talk about our thoroughfare plan again as soon as we get our pictures back up here. And we'll get going here. There we go. So our purpose this evening is to conduct a public hearing on a proposed amendment to the thoroughfare plan. And the location of this is South Toll Bridge Road from the Lampasas River down to Elmer King. Back in January, the council adopted numerous amendments to the thoroughfare plan. And as part of that process, we ran into discussions about the toll house that was down on South Toll Bridge Road. And we ultimately approved the plan with a exception relating to the toll house. And so we delayed that outcome until this time. Actually, the council approved us till January. So the area that was left over is this area right here, which is highlighted in red and now in yellow again. And so we left it there on the plan as an area for future evaluation. As you can see, it's south of Shanklin, south of the river, and down to Elmer King. And I'm doing that just because I know how to use the pointer. So since then, we retained KPA to do some alternative analysis. We went from 80 to 60 right away, particularly because we met with the neighbors in the area who have unfortunately stood me up this evening. But so we met with them several times, late in 21, and then in May again, as recently as June. And in those discussions, they had some heartburn over a 60-foot right of way. And then we suggested a 50-foot right of way. We came up with a minor collector C hybrid cross section. And we tried to discuss that with the neighbors in the area there. So this is kind of the 50-foot alternative hybrid C. I won't dwell on that a lot because it was also thrown out by the neighborhood. And one of the issues there was not only the taking or the potential impact on their properties in terms of future right-of-way, but of course, getting around the toll house, which is a historic structure there. So we thought we had to nail down all the objectives, but after we met early June, they rejected that idea as well. So we felt that we just needed to move on. We just felt like we needed to move on. And so the message has always been that, the plan, as you all know, is implemented only when property is developed. And the property owners are always in a very unique position to control that road development, that new development, or what have you. I mean, that street widening. And then the thoroughfare plan has to, in reaction to that, has to reflect a condition that can manage future development. And so the city has to have those regulatory tools to implement a safe and effective thoroughfare plan to move traffic, to keep neighborhoods safe, and to be able to obtain the facilities that the city needs in anticipation of future growth. We presented this to our planning commission back in June, and after they discussed this, after the public hearing, and by the way, I don't know if we put that in the notes, but nobody came to the public hearing. They recommended approval of the thoroughfare plan by returning to the 80-foot right-of-way with the section that matches the section that is planned for north of the river, which was negotiated by the city for river farms. And so that has come forward. And as you can see, we modified the plan to reflect that 80-foot right-of-way. It's again somewhat different than what our normal cross-section is because it's going to match what's north of the river, which is a section that y'all have been working on for a long time. As you can see, this is recommended by the Planning Commission. And this is an example of what is in the development agreement with River Farms. And so that'll be continued on through the south of the river. So this evening, I recommend that we hold the public hearing and that the council approve the commission's recommendation to amend the thoroughfare plan to include that 80-foot right-of-way section, which is similar to the area north of the river. So I'll leave it there and I'll step back. And if you have any questions later, I'll be happy to try and answer them.
Thank you, Bob. Appreciate it. At this time, we'll open the public hearing. If anyone wishes to speak in for or against this proposal, please identify yourself. Seeing or hearing none, I'll close the public hearing and open it up for council discussion.
I appreciate the city's efforts in extending olive branch after olive branch after olive branch. But I think you can try and control or partner. And after so long, the traffic flow is going to be there. And it's just a matter of time. And I think there will be numerous vehicles headed south to get on I-35 versus travel up north. And so I think keeping the 80-foot right away in our back pocket makes sense. And we'll try to accommodate the house. So however we can do that at a later date in a very courteous manner, as a good stewards of that. But I think we should keep the 80-foot right away.
I agree. Nothing's going to happen tomorrow if we approve this tonight.
No.
So I think it's the right thing to do, and it just makes sense. I mean, why would you narrow it down to next to nothing, even
Well,
with that, they're not.
I don't think we can make them happy. So I think the decision to do what's best in the interest of the future of the city is what we need to do.
I wish I could do that as well. I can't. I will, when the motion is made, I'll vote no because while I think the folks have done themselves a disservice, and I agree that nothing happens until development occurs, and they are the instigators in a positive way of that development. But trying to negotiate down and then sticking with up, I'm not sure that that's the correct approach either.
And please don't interpret that my comments as unwillingness to work at a later date. Well, I want everybody to be happy, but I think giving up the right of way now just doesn't make
Doesn't
sense.
make any sense.
There's no.
I agree. And if somebody besides us came along, because I think we are all up here very sensitive to that, and I agree with that. But I think an 80-foot would be destructive for the toll house. And goodness gracious, I probably won't be around that long. So that's really the reason for my vote that way.
I should take more on the other side. Unless you redirect on the other side. So that,
Well, personally,
this is not a vote to destroy the toll house.
Right.
No,
I agree.
No, and I think when we couldn't
all be here.
come to an agreement, it's just, let's stick with what rules we have in place. I think that's what we have to fall back on. We're not asking for more than what's in our current guidelines, correct? So, okay.
and it has been stated, we're not talking about doing anything until that land starts to develop. So I just think I'm sensitive to the need of those folks. I'm a historical monument myself, and I don't want to see the house demolished or whatever. But I think we have to look down the road 10, 15 years, and the traffic out there is going to increase exponentially. I think we need to go ahead and bite the bullet, because I don't think we're ever going to come to an agreement in the near future, at least. I would entertain a motion on item number 11.
I move we approve the recommended amendment to the Belton Thoroughfare Plan related to South Toll Bridge Road from the Lampasas River to Elmer King Road.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the amendment to the Belton Thoroughfare Plan. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, please say no.
No.
And the motion passes 4-1.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Now we get to more of the fun stuff.
That was fun.
Not that planning and zoning is not fun, Sam. I mean,
That was
seriously.
fun.
But item number 12 is to consider a resolution adopting the Imagine Belton Plan. And that's something that's, for some folks of a certain age, this is kind of like the old Sears wish list. It's a Christmas catalog that you can look at for hours and think about, man, we can do this and we can do that. So please tell us about it.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Yeah, we are excited to present this item to you tonight. Y'all recall back in May, we had a joint meeting with the city council, BEDC, and the TERS board to receive a presentation by Covey to present the Imagine Belton plan. The plan represents a marketing vision of the Belton Economic Development Corporation, and it had several goals, as you can see there. The plan was to serve as a guide for investment in the core of our community, to improve connections into the downtown area, and to utilize a lot of the unique characteristics that we have here in Belton, especially the Nolan Creek, and to do those more effectively. Guided by BEDC and a really robust advisory committee, we had several meetings, and then consultants, of course, from Covey guiding that process, and KPA. The plan before you is a dynamic plan, as I think y'all have all seen and appreciate. It will build on our assets and partnerships to achieve the results. As you remember, Covey broke down the city and the study area into 6 sub-districts in the vicinity of downtown. And we also got some great input from UMHB as a part of the process. The elements track the proposals in the plan and will serve as the building blocks for what we do next. We have laid out for you a number of steps to take in order to implement the plan. I think the council, as we finished the meeting, was very excited about what comes next. And so we've tried to lay out a number of steps that will take us months and then probably into next year even as well. The first step is a resolution that formally adopts the plan under consideration by the 3 entities, BDC, the council, and the commissioner's court. The inclusion of the plan will be a component of our strategic plan update that we're working on now. We'll be looking at our codes and standards to review those to ensure that there's flexibility in our local processes. And then we'll also be looking at financial incentives focused on the plan's study area. The resolution that we have before you was crafted to identify the partnerships for roles for each of those 3 entities. Pleased to present and to report to you that BEDC adopted the resolution on June 15th. The County Commissioners Court adopted the resolution yesterday after a presentation about a week ago. And then the council's action today will hopefully complete this first step to implement the plan and provide us an opportunity to go forward. And we have a number of exciting things that we hope to do as a part of this process, as you saw in the packet. Certainly an overlay district is a possibility, something that we're investigating that will signal support for the plan. We'll be looking at our design standards in this particular area to see how we might induce development. As I mentioned, financial incentives that we'll be looking at. We'll also be working with TxDOT and KTEMPO on the street planning in the area. A number of these streets are state highways, and so we'll obviously have to coordinate with them as we work to do that. In terms of fiscal impact, certainly the resolution has no immediate costs, but we called your attention that there certainly will be some costs to go forward. We're working on a final scope with Covey right now to help us in evaluating the existing codes and evaluating incentives. And BDC has agreed, and their budget review that you'll see here in a few minutes, to cost share the consulting work with the city. So we're excited to present this item to you tonight and to recommend adoption of the resolution with a shout out to appreciation for all the partners that were involved in this process. Had a note from Joe Shepard today. He could not attend today, but certainly he was the visionary behind the study and brought that forward. Cynthia's here certainly and can speak to the situation. And then Travis is here as well. So I'll be glad to answer any questions. We're ready to go. Thank you.
Thank you. Just one thing, I give a shout out to Travis Crow back there in the green shirt from Covey and Associates. Did a great job of working with us and putting things together. And as Mr. Listy said, I think Mr. Shepard deserves a lot of credit. He saw the work that they had done down in Brazos County, I guess it was, and was excited about prospect of doing that for Belton. And he presented that idea, and it's just blossomed from there. So, Travis, we appreciate all y'all's work. Questions or comments from council?
I think it's very exciting. And I think this is the plan that'll take us to the next level from all the, standing on the shoulders of giants, right? We've worked so hard to get to where we are, and this is such an exciting next step, and really going to be exciting to watch, be a part of.
as a citizen, sometimes you lose vision or goals, and to have somebody come in from outside with districts and the latest, greatest, and neatest design and flow and plan is really exciting. And boy, thanks to Joe Shepherd and everybody that participated. It's nice that they were able to Cynthia spearhead that and get that to us. The county commissioners as well is a very important key to this, our success, and just exciting to see.
I agree. It's one of the most exciting things I've ever seen, to have the team of teams coalesce around it as well as it has, to include investors who are already lining up to participate is just really, really exciting to me. Let's do this.
Yeah.
Second.
That'll work. That works for me.
Dan, did you want to say something before we run it past you? I do want to say thank you to Cynthia, because trying to schedule these meetings with about, I don't know how many total people, with everybody having really busy schedules. I know she was very busy trying to bring folks together, but we did have a great group of folks. And I was at county commissioners meeting yesterday. They were very complimentary and voted unanimously to approve their partnership with the plan. And some of the plans from Mary Hart and Baylor are just incredibly exciting to me, but well, there's some of that in the plan. We just have to get Mary Hart and Baylor to, all it takes is a little time and money. It looks exciting.
They're pretty good.
Yes, they are.
We have a motion.
We have a motion. We don't have a second.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to adopt the Imagine Belton plan. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say no, and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Sam. And speaking of good news, item 13, to consider authorizing the award of small business grants funded by the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 for Belton small businesses impacted by COVID-19 in the total amount of $850,000. Mr. Liston.
Thank you. I guess I get all the fun items to present tonight.
Yes, you do.
This is really, really great. We're so pleased to present this item. It has been a little time in coming, but I think a good process that we'll demonstrate to you tonight. In March, as you recall, the council adopted a resolution allocating the funds from the COVID-19 Act, the ARPA funds, almost $5.7 million. The council set aside $850,000 for grants to small businesses. And then we approved an interlocal agreement with SITCOG to receive and batch the applications for us for our review. And certainly my thanks go out to Jim Reed, Ryan, who's here, and Anna as well, Anna Barge, who did a tremendous amount of work in receiving these and having a lot of interaction with all the property owners or the businesses who made those requests. So we appreciate their significant help. The criteria for the grant are these items that I think you all will recall. Obviously, recipients must be a Belton small business currently in operation, fewer than 100 employees, physical location in the city, demonstrating a negative impact from COVID-19. We originally set out a maximum assistance amount of $20,000, obviously awaiting applications to know how far the money would go, with a minimum of $5,000. Any business was eligible to submit an application, including ones that might have received previous relief funding from the city. We outlined that nonprofits are eligible, but faith-based nonprofits are ineligible. And then you can see the outline of eligible expenses. We're trying to emphasize capital expenditures and to not allow operational expenses. So you can see the kinds of things that were allowed there. Salaries and operating expenses are ineligible. The mayor appointed a 5-member small business grant committee to review the applications and develop recommendations. And that included the mayor, council members Pearson and Holmes, Chamber Board Chair Brent Burks, Finance Director Mike Rogers, CVB Retail Coordinator Judy Garrett, and myself. This is kind of a summary of what we received initially. We received 64 applications, including for-profit firms and nonprofit agencies as well. Again, there were a number of eligibility requirements that the folks had to meet. They had to ensure that all due taxes had been paid, had to confirm that everyone had a valid CO, certificate of occupancy, for the building, And again, an important point was an understanding that proposed expenditures were prospective. They could not have already spent the money involving the capital expenditures. In fact, we had one person who turned in their application and said, well, I've already spent the money and I'd like to be reimbursed for that, but that was not eligible. So in the end, we had 55 for-profit and 4 not-for-profit agencies that met all the criteria and were recommended by the committee. Given that number of applications, we couldn't get to the $20,000 for everybody, but we were able to recommend to the council an applicant's request, because some requested less than the full 20,000. And so everyone got what they requested up to the 15,240. That's the typical amount you see in the summary of those that requested 20 and had $20,000 in eligible expenses. The principal amount was 15,240. So again, after the council's review of these items, and if y'all approve the recommendation of the committee, Mike Rogers is already working on preparation of a award letter that will go out tomorrow or certainly this week sometime, which will outline the grant amount, the terms for the expenditure and reimbursement, and certainly a commitment by the awardee that they will comply with all the grant conditions, that they're certainly eligible and can meet all the conditions. And again, that the expenses are in the future to come. The applicants will have until December 31st, about a year and a half, to spend the money and to get reimbursed for those expenditures. So again, $850,000 in ARPA funds. You might be surprised. It's harder to give away money than you might think. There certainly are some challenges, but we had some great help. Judy was amazing. Certainly Ryan and his folks, Anna Barge, really super help. And so we're excited to present this to you. You have a list of grant awardees in your packet that is certainly there. And I'm be glad to answer any questions you might have about any of those or our evaluations or process. And certainly several of you were on the committee, so you're certainly have some awareness of the situation. So any questions?
Questions for Mr. Listy?
Hey, what is fun to be such good stewards of federal dollars, and
Yes.
not only to pass that out to small businesses, but also some nonprofits that we
Yes,
were
sir.
able to help.
Mhm,
And some
exactly.
of the letters that we received were extremely heartwarming and
Yes.
very
Mhm,
touching
mhm.
for some of the people that use the grocery program.
Yes. Mhm.
As well as utilities. I mean, we've just done an awful lot, and I think our focus was on citizens and small business and what we could do to help help them.
I would add that I'm most excited to see nonprofits added, because I think nonprofits really were hit really hard as well during the pandemic, and they didn't have near the
Sure.
availability of support as small businesses. So it's exciting.
That's good.
Any other comments? Again, you've already expressed thank you to Mr. Reed and Ryan and Anna Barge at the COG, but I know they did a lot of work for us, and I don't think they charged us anything.
They
to
did
do
not. It was.
That's even better. So, yeah,
We appreciate it very
appreciative
much.
of
Very
their help.
grateful.
Very grateful. And John said it really well. Sometimes you get a little frustrated being here when everything doesn't go exactly right, but when you get those letters of support, appreciation from folks like that, it makes you feel really good. And Mr. Pittenger's here. We were glad to have Brent Burke on the committee to give us an outside perspective. And I think it's been a great thing. I would entertain a motion.
I move we approve agenda item number 13 is presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve agenda item number 13. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. I hear none. It passes unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Listy. Item number 14, to consider authorizing the BEDC Executive Director to execute a contract for the sale of 19.23 acres in the Belton Business Park to Tradition Land Limited. And Cynthia Hernandez, the BEDC Executive Director, will tell us about that.
Thank you. Okay, well, let me. Perfect. Thank you, Chris. Okay, so good evening, Mayor, council members. So today what we have for you is a contract for BEDC to sell property to Tradition Land LLC. Our staff has been working with a developer for about 6 months to build a speculative light industrial space in the Belton Business Park. We have been working with the developer's broker for almost a year now for that type of development. And so this developer came to us very interested in the business park because of its location and the fact that it's in an opportunity zone. And so in April, the board approved an LOI for the sale of 19 acres to Tradition Land for the development of over 100,000 square feet of light industrial space. The board was presented with a contract in June for the sale of property. And at this point, I'm going to make a correction to the memo that was provided in your packet. Have to humble myself here and tell you that I've made an error and I added really quickly. And the sales price is actually $914,384. About $200,000 less than what was in your memo, but 914,000 is in fact what the contract states and what the BDC Board of Directors approved. And so to talk you through the contract, oh gosh. Okay, hold on. Okay, so to talk you through the contract, essentially we would sell the property 16.4 acres along Digby Drive. That's priced at about $1 per square foot. And then we own 2.8 acres on I-14. And so that we priced at $200,000 for the total acreage there. And so the contract is for $914,384. And the buyer would deposit $100,000 in earnest money. They have a 90-day inspection period with an option to extend that twice. 30-day extension each at a rate of $25,000 per extension. When we go to closing, that will be applied to the sales price. Like with all contracts, we do have a repurchase provision. This is a little different because typically we're working with a business that is going to construct a facility and operate out of that facility upon issuance of a CO. In this case, again, it is a speculative development and we are not offering BEDC. There are no BEDC incentives tied to this sales contract. So we are asking that they construct at least 100,000 square feet of slab, that they install the slab for that square footage within 24 months of closing and recording of the sales contract. Once they complete that portion of it, then the repurchase provision will be satisfied. And then the final component to note is that we will pay 3% commission. Again, with the difference in the actual sales price, our estimated amount that we'll pay in commission is $27,431. A little bit about the project. This is their first draft of a site plan. Lots of engineering that still needs to go into this, but at first glance, this is what their architects are proposing. You'll see 3 buildings there ranging from 80,000 to 95,000 square feet. This is a $25 to $30 million investment in, again, light industrial space. Tilt wall construction is what they're proposing to do. The property along Digby Drive is zoned light industrial. The property on the I-14 frontage is currently zoned agriculture, so a zoning change will need to occur there. That'll be a later item, I assume, that comes before City Council, P&Z, and then Council. The developer is ready to move forward today. This project is financed. And they have a surveyor on hand ready to be on site next week, assuming that this item goes well tonight. Let me see, what other notes should I make? The other very important note is that this actually will put some inventory on the ground. BEDC has considered building speculative buildings in the past couple of years. We've talked about it. We've been successful in 3 speculative buildings. And to date, we own 0 of those buildings. So I would say they've gone well and they're all occupied. But at the time, the board's position was that if the private market could satisfy that, that was a better use of the taxpayers' dollars. And so with that, we are pleased to have outside investment coming in to do this. And we would work with the developers to help market the buildings as well. Upon the sale of this property, this illustrates what property BEDC will own. You can see the 1 through 4 are the larger tracts that are currently zoned light industrial, and then we'll have 2 small parcels in our PUD. We are currently, we continue to get many inquiries on these parcels, and we're having serious discussions with a couple of buyers. And so a lot of activity in our area. And with that, the board of directors approved the contract for the sale of property to Tradition Land LLC at a sales price of $914,384 on June 15th. And with that, we ask the city council's approval of BEDC sale of property as per the contract in your packet. Any questions?
Thank you, Cynthia. Questions? Comments?
Congrats.
Yeah, I think it's great.
Thanks.
Great to
We're
have the
excited.
outside investment, like you said. So great
Indeed,
job.
that's healthy economic development as well.
Sure is. Well, do you need a motion?
I do.
I'll make a motion that we approve item number 14 as presented.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve item number 14. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. I hear none. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Cynthia. It's exciting. And like Stephanie said, it's great to have outside investors who want to be in Belton because we want those quality folks to be here. Due to popular request, I'm going to take a 5-minute recess for the council before Mr. Rogers starts on a fairly long
That's a good idea.
explanation.
I did mine earlier.
We'll have a better chance of having more.
This is for the old part of the table.
Yeah,
This is the old part of the table.
Oh, you do have a little thing. Probably more than
Good job. Hey, what's better than choosing more?
Yeah, we'd rather sell it for
Well,
more.
that's true. True. I was thinking about the error. Oh, I see the error now. Yeah, I see what you're saying. I see. Yeah.
Way to
Come
go.
on. We all do it.
That's what I like to know.
I'll never forget. Yeah. I don't either. Neither. I'm helping, clicking along. I like that. That's what it says.
How are you, Mr. Holmes? You doing all right?
Amy,
Oh,
what
no,
time
no,
would you
no,
break?
No, no. I did.
Super majority.
Yeah.
They got turned down.
No, I mean,
No,
Oh, I don't know about that.
well, now we're just prolonging it.
Yeah, every time we told him that the first time. P and Z told him that. It's not like.
I was picking the tent.
I was really impressed that was Dan that brought that up, because that's really a good point. Why prolong it?
It'd be nice to.
When they first approached me, it was all been this person.
unfortunately, I won't do that, but
That's a good combination. Now, planning. You can go ahead and do it. Right, you got the right early on. Probably shouldn't be talking. No, that's right. I'm gonna go where my mouth shut. We didn't take what we were supposed to.
You're most welcome. Well needed. It's 7:05. We're almost 7:05. So we will corral Mr. Kirkley and we'll resume the meeting.
Of course he is.
Mr. Rogers, please go ahead.
And not too much water.
Come to order, please.
Okay, the meeting, we are resuming the meeting at 7:05.
All right, I'll got a few opening comments and then I'll turn it over to Mike.
Okay.
Of course, this is the second session on the operating budget. We've had obviously meetings with all the department heads and the council tour we just conducted in mid-May. The strategic plan is under development in-house with a council discussion scheduled in August. Just obviously, we're watching closely the impacts of COVID and all inflationary type issues. But the uncertainties from COVID seem to have settled down a little bit. They've dissipated. We're certainly seeing some positive signs from and strong growth and development. Can you hear me, Dan? Can you hear me, Dan?
Thank you.
Thank you. Inflation is certainly something that we have our eyes on and we're concerned about, watching everything going on, and it certainly will remain so at least for the next 18 months or so. What you'll see in the budget that Mike's going to present is that most revenue sources for 23 are growing: sales tax, property tax, and other building permits, as you can imagine with what's going on right now. Personnel costs clearly increasing over $1 million due to implementation of the compensation study. We were fortunate to use some of the funding from the ARPA grant to us in that way to help us ease into that situation. Revenue projections for property taxes show about an 18% increase, an increase in the value based on voter approval tax rate that may be less than 60 cents preliminary. Of course, we're at 63 cents now, and we're cautious in presenting that to y'all at this particular point in time, but we obviously recognize that value increases are occurring as a result of appraisals, and we'll certainly reflect that in a proposed property tax rate that's come. But we won't have that, the final numbers with all the protests until July 25th. So it's a little ways off. Sales tax, about a 10% increase we're seeing over last year. As I mentioned, the ARPA funding really important for revenue replacement. We've done many good things with it. John, thanks for mentioning that. Certainly it's helped our budget in terms of staffing, but we've also, I think, been true to the funding objective and distributed those funding throughout the community as well for local priorities. Also significant, I think, in the budget are the grants and federal earmarks for PD equipment, and all those grants that we work on. Some of them are 5 and 10,000, some of them potentially, in the millions, but they are all important in leveraging local resources and reducing expenditures to the local taxpayer. So just wanted to make those comments. See the key objectives in the budget. We have 3 new positions that we're proposing to you across all funds. We are submitting a COPS grant that could provide an additional police officer, but in the budget we have a new deputy court clerk, an IT analyst, a regional director of law enforcement was added in mid-year this year. And then we're reclassifying the director of Parks and Recreation position into a recreation superintendent position. So modest growth in personnel, certainly not meeting every objective by any means, but trying to address really critical needs. We are proposing an increase in street maintenance funding to $1 million from $650,000. That's a major increase, but we feel like the resources are there to accomplish that. And then, as we talked about previously with capital equipment replacement funds, we're going to continue to work hard and fund properly all that equipment that perhaps was underfunded in the past in some respects. So you'll see some contribution increases in that area.
Are we saying in that line, Sam, that we're not able to reach our goal, like the $1 million we had for streets, we're able to get there, but we're making progress?
We're there.
towards the goal on
We're
the capital
proposing.
equipment?
We're proposing $1 million in street maintenance.
$1 million on streets, right?
Right.
But
And
the last one
contribution.
is the last bullet's a little bit confusing. Are we not quite getting to the goal, or?
I will
Do I need
clarify
to
that
you'll tell me in a
shortly.
minute?
You'll see.
No is the answer to your
We've
question,
spread
but
it
I'll
out-
clarify.
Spread some of those items out a little bit, but you'll see in my
Okay.
presentation.
I'm sorry.
No, one other question, since Craig's already interrupted you. On the change in the Parks and Recreation, what does that entail?
So we currently have in our budget, the 22 budget, we have a director of public works and a director of parks and recreation. Because Matt Bates is an overachiever, he wants to do both of those positions. So what the plan would be is to basically eliminate or reclassify that director of parks and recreation into a recreation superintendent position, essentially downgrading that position from a director level into a superintendent level. actually some savings to be had there. Thank you, ma'am.
Could I ask what would be the salary of that position? Ish?
I couldn't even tell you, honestly, I don't have that right here in front of me.
Are you looking for a job?
It'll come.
We'll look into that and provide that for you.
It does answer the question. Legitimate. Who's that?
Okay.
I'm sorry, go ahead. Sidebar comments up here.
It's okay. If we could do this whole thing in 4 slides, that'd be great. Here we go. And now that we've got the fun and interesting agenda items out of the way, here we go. So let's talk about the budget a bit. What I wanted to give you here with this slide is a look at the 22 fiscal year budget compared to the preliminary budget for 23. And so in 22, we have total resources of 36.3 million with total expenditures of 34.1. In fiscal 23, total resources will reach $43.7 million. That's a 20% increase over the fiscal 22 revenues. But also, it should be noted that expenditures are also going up by the same 20% to 41.2 million. So there is a significant difference there, and I'll kind of explain some of the reasons why the budget increased so much for 23. We're going to talk specifically about these funds tonight, general fund, debt service, our 2 internal service funds, hotel, motel, TERS and EDC. But let's start with the general fund, but before we get into 23, let me tell you how we might end 22. We budgeted 17.4 million in balanced budget revenues and expenditures, and it looks like we may end with revenues of 18.248. Expenditures coming in about where we budgeted 17.4, increasing reserves by about 759,000. So why is that? Well, it's really due to these 2 things. Sales tax revenue and permitting fees are much higher than we budgeted. 640,000 for sales tax revenue, 320,000 for permitting. But one thing I want to point out, that revenue growth is going to be partially offset by property tax revenue, which appears to be now coming in around $200,000 less than we budgeted for the year. That's kind of in relation to collections. Right now, where we typically are at like almost a 99% collection of our levy at this point, we're more like 97%. That doesn't mean it won't be paid. It's just, we're just lagging there. We may not get it by the end of this fiscal year. It'll become delinquent, and then we'll collect it through the delinquent part.
And what's our collection rate?
It has been
98 or something?
It's around that. It's actually, yeah, it's for year 1 collection rate is around the 98%, 99, closer to 99. This year seems to be lagging a little bit. And I don't know if that's just timing or economy. And as mentioned before, expenditures are falling in line with budget. So we could end this fiscal year, if those numbers come in at $6.2 million of reserves, that's 35% of our budgeted expenditures. Moving on to fiscal 23, I have $21.1 million of revenue budgets next year and $20.6 million of expenditures in the general fund, increasing reserves to 532,000. We would end at this $6.7 million at the end of 23, and that's 32.6% of budgeted expenditures. You'll recall that our fund balance policy is that we're trying to maintain right around that 30% mark, and we'll be just over that if this comes to play. Graphically, that looks this way. You can see these blue bars, green bars this way, shows our actual fund balance over the years. The blue line you see going across there is our minimum reserve requirement. And you can see we're kind of ending in that at the end of 23. So first I want to look through revenues, do a budget to budget comparison for revenues by category. These numbers you see over here are our revenue categories. Our fiscal 22 budget is 17.4 million. And again, we're planning on ending the year around 18.2. In fiscal 23, we'll increase revenues by $3.7 million over the fiscal 22 budget. And you can see kind of the big things that are causing that. This transfer you see here, that sales tax number you see there. And I'll talk a little bit about those.
Mike, would you adjust that collection rate for 2023?
I don't get to play with collection rates any longer.
Oh.
The legislature took that away from us to like the last session or so.
Okay.
That's completely up to Belcad. They tell you what your collection rate is, and that's the collection rate that you use.
Okay.
Um,
And that was budgeted FY 23 of 7.9 million for property tax. That's based on the 60 cent
Correct.
levy,
Yes, sir.
which would be an 18% increase.
It's an actual decline in the rate, but based upon the
Oh.
rate, the property value is increasing that. Yes, sir. Breaking this down a little bit, property tax makes up 38% of our revenues in fiscal 23, sales tax 29%. Good mix there.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry.
No, yes, sir.
Because this was pretty important to me. Sales tax and our forecast for a 10% increase.
Yes, sir.
I think it's up 15.
Mhm.
I'm a little anxious about economy spending.
I'm going to cover that.
Okay,
I want to show you some things, and you, please, your feedback, I'd
I
appreciate.
am a little worried.
Me too. But that's what we need to talk about.
Thank you.
I have a few charts to show you some things that are concerning.
Good.
So let's talk property tax a little bit. I know that's meaningful for everybody. I don't know where the numbers are going to end. In April, Belcad told us that they expect us to end at $1.8 billion in property, taxable value, property values. That would be an 18% increase for total values. However, we have some properties within the TERS, and that estimate is a 27% growth of properties that are within the TERS. Non-TERS growth is about 15%. 1 second, I want to do this here because I want to show you something. So the revenue that is included in the general fund budget that we're talking about tonight is based upon a voter approval rate of 59.56. Again, we're currently at 63 cents. And this is, we would go down just based upon these preliminary numbers and me putting it in a spreadsheet and playing with some stuff, a lot of variables left. But we could fall, the voter approval rate would be 59.56. So what I encourage you to do is don't get fixated right now on that rate. I don't know what that rate's going to be. If things, values come in stronger than the 1.825 billion, then that's going to have downward pressure on that number, on that rate. If it comes in, values come in lower, then it'll have upward pressure on that rate. What I'm really looking for you to do tonight is kind of think of the term voter approval rate. Once we get the final rates and we do the calculations, the voter approval rate may be higher or less than that 59.56. So I don't want you to get fixated on that. The reason that's important as well is this budget is based upon a voter approval rate, and that happens to be the one I'm using right now. And the no new revenue rate is about 3 cents lower than that. That used to be the effective tax rate. The no new revenue rate's about 3 cents less than that, which would, if you wanted to do that, I mean, going voter approval brings in about $400,000, $430,000 more in revenue than the no new revenue rate does. So that's why I want you to focus really more on that term, because whatever that number is kind of where our proposed budget is going to be based upon for now. Again, you'll adopt a rate in September. So at that 59.56, we would grow revenues for city purposes by about 746,000, and TERS would grow by 305. So let me just show you graphically. Again, this is a history on this side. You see the history of the levy for O&M, TERS, and debt over the last several years. Graphically, you can see blue is the O&M component of the levy growing over time. Yellow is TERS, green is debt service. Moving on to sales tax. This is one of my favorite topics. So for 2023, I am increasing my proposed budget or preliminary budget that you see tonight is a 10% increase over where we might land in 22, projected year end of 22. And historically, the last few years have been like 14%, 19%. And then this year, I'm projecting, I think that increase to be around 15%. So in that respect, it seems, okay, 10 is less than that average there. I can tell you, I've been doing this business for 22 years. I have never budgeted a 10% increase in sales tax ever. So yes, I'm a little nervous. But if it doesn't come in at that, this is a $550,000 increase. If we budgeted, I'm making up a number, 5% increase, our revenues would go down 200 or half that, 250,000 or so. So it's not a dramatic decline if it still grows, but at a lesser rate. This is a picture of sales tax history, but here's a couple of things I want to show you. Okay, so this is 12 months of sales tax collections since March of 2019 through March of 2022. And you can see that, but down here, we were at about almost $5.5 million for a year. And now in March of 22, a short time later, we're almost at $8 million. A significant increase in our sales tax revenue in just that 3-year time frame. Also, what I want you to show, what I wanted to show you is this time last year, I was looking at that flattening right there at this time last year, and I was concerned about that. Well, I guess I don't need to be concerned about that any longer, seeing how much we went up there, right? But that shows you that that's just where we were last year at this time. I was a bit worried about that flattening. But here's a better picture of something I want to show you. So I take our sales tax report from the comptroller, and I take the people paying us and kind of put them into some kind of industry categories that you see at the bottom here in this legend. And this isn't NACIS or whatever it is, or ICS, it's just me. So we have some folks that are in the construction and industry, and some are in entertainment, gas and auto, restaurants, et cetera. So this red line that you see here, that's our retail component. And this is sales tax generated by the retail component from January of 2020 to March of 2022. And you can see this growth gets going up here, which looks, pretty good there. The blue line that you see there is the construction component of our sales tax makeup. Okay. And what I want to show you is this growth that you're seeing there in the construction component of our sales tax revenue. And that is getting closer to the total retail. That construction component is now 29% of our total sales tax revenue comes from construction related industries, your lumber yards, your building equipment, your things like that. Okay. So here we sit now with this growing component that you see there of sales tax from construction related companies. And now I have mortgage rates getting closer to 6% now. I've got inflation as inflation is growing, all of these headwinds that are hitting the construction industry, that may not be able to continue that pace of growth. It might. We certainly have a lot platted. We have a lot of permits still coming in, a lot of things happening here. It's not going to probably come to a halt. However, with that growing component related to construction, the 10% it makes me a little nervous. I wouldn't bring it to you if I didn't think I could live with it. But it does make me a little bit nervous. Any comments that you want to share there?
No, and just planning to spend those dollars from a 10% increase worries me.
Yeah.
We know the Fed's got another rate hike in July, 2 or 3 more before the end of the year. People I've talked to, that is mortgage rates has really impacted new home sales and purchases. No more refinancing to speak of. And if you factor in a little bit of maybe an issue with collection rate, this time I'm a little worried. I mean, in your budget here, the dramatic changes you have for fuel expense are just amazing.
Right.
And so I think there's a lot of issues that we really need to think of. And I would rather be a little more conservative and say, man, 7.5 or 8, and be so thankful for what we've enjoyed and just have excess than plan to spend something that may really slow down.
So you'll recall, I agree with you there. You will recall that I did not bring to you a budget that had equal revenues and equal expenditures. In fact, the budget that's there that's is looking at a $500,000 increase if that 10% came into play. So yes, I would caution council as we start developing this budget going forward. That cushion may work out in our favor in 23, especially with a 10% sales tax that may not come in. So that's part of the reason that cushion is there. I agree with you.
And, you know, just from my perspective, I see a few things that are kind of on the wish list. I would rather see us gradually get to the $1 million in street maintenance. Boy, we're doing really well. I hate to commit to $1 million from 650. I'd rather go 800 to 850 and then $1 million next year or later and ease into that instead of fully commit, because I feel like once we do it, there's no going back. And that's also projected at 59 cents. And I think it'll be hard. It'll be hard for me to do 59 cents, knowing that some taxpayers' rates will go up significantly. So I think there's some variables here that we really need to consider, and just jumping to $1 million on the streets, I think is a little concerning for me. You know, we've come such a long way. Let's keep doing it incrementally.
And yeah, and another question for me is, and we've talked at several of our meetings about the ARP money that we're getting, and how do we make up for that when we don't have it anymore? So
You're correct. So
Salaries, we come such a long way with salaries.
yeah,
let's trucker along and then we'll get to that.
okay.
Because those are great questions. Other big revenue things, and this is it. Okay, well, here, well, let's talk about it. Transfers grows by a large amount, 1.5 million. And that is because, remember, we implemented the full compensation study and we said we'd push in 900,000. Yes, that will go away in it won't be available for 24 fiscal. But you're right where I need you to go with the tax rate discussion, and the thoughts that we need to have in our mind as we go forward is, I've got to cover those kind of things. I wanted to do it and show it. And I think at this rate that I have, at a voter approval rate, see how I clarified that, I'm bringing in enough revenue to make, when that goes away, we're okay. If we decided to just go as low as we can, you know, with those future things out there, it gets to be trickier. So yes, that's correct.
Well, and Mike, I think, you know, we're going to see the biggest COLAs in Social Security and military pay for many years. How's that going to work on our personnel? I'm willing to wait to get there, but I'm saying, I think that's a wedge that we've got to consider as well.
Yes.
As we can within the constraints.
Agreed. Let's all of this direction is great, fantastic for you guys. I'm excited. We're getting some feedback. Let's if you want us to address that, now's the time to talk about it, because this is the level of discussion I want to have tonight. The other part of transfers, what's growing that, I just wanted to share with you, this personnel cost allocation, you'll see a couple of times in the presentation. What that is like this 700,000 that you see there in the general fund. This is transfers coming from other departments. Okay. We have historically, this is $700,000 worth of general fund personnel costs that were being reported in the personnel costs of other divisions, which is not very transparent. So I'm fixing that by keeping all of the general fund costs in general fund. For instance, all of the city manager's costs. He's that 700,000, right? So I can point to one person. Sam Listy is at 700 grand. No, that's Heath. No, don't take that to the press. It's not Sam Listy. But we used to chop Sam Listy's salary up and put some of it in the water sewer, some of it in hotels or whatever, all these different places. And you lose the true cost of a city manager. So what I'm fixing for the sake of transparency is we're budgeting all of those costs where they belong. And then the other funds are now transferring money into the general fund to cover the cost.
Which allows you to measure the true cost of the program as well.
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's absolutely correct. It's just not hidden. We're not just, you know, the effect's the exact same way. It's just more transparent this way. Refuse collection goes up every year as we have more and more people coming in. With this revenue increase, there's also an expenditure increase of a similar amount. Speaking of expenditures, so I want to look at expenditures a few different ways. First, by function. These are kind of the functions of government, and we spend about 50% of our budget will be on public safety. General government makes up about 12%. That's your finance, your city manager, city council, human resources, et cetera, are in that general government function. Moving on to expenditures by category. These are our expenditure categories. 59% of our budget will go towards personnel. That's actually fairly low. Typically, governments see around 65 to 70% of their budget going to payroll. Here it's 59. Comparing fiscal 22 to fiscal 23 expenditures, again, with $17.4 million in fiscal 22 becomes $20.6 million in 2023. You can see the big difference there is primarily personnel. But let me cover some of those in some detail. Okay, so personnel from a budget to budget standpoint goes up $1.6 million in 23. The largest big chunk of that is that comp study that we implemented in full. We knew those costs were going to go up, and that was still the wise decision on council's part to do that. A couple of new things here. One new thing out of this is this cost of labor adjustment. I have this one here. So we have not done cost of labor adjustments before. We have always done merit increases for the non-civil service folks. Civil service people, those guys and gals get their scheduled increases, throughout. That's not really a merit increase. It's more of a schedule. Mm-hmm. But our HR consultant recommends it to any city. I've heard her say it many times. If you want to stay in the market with your pay scales, you should do both a cost of labor adjustment and a merit increase. Because what we'll do is we'll treat these a little bit differently. With the cost of labor adjustment, we not only move the person, but we move the scale. So the scale will move along. So our scale is kind of keeping up with the market as we're doing these cost of labor adjustments. This cost of labor adjustment of 2% is what we have in there now and kind of recommend at this point. Goes to all city employees, civil service and non-civil service would get a cost of labor adjustment, and that cost is $167,000. Merit increases would be awarded to non-civil service employees of up to 5%. That's $192,000. Civil service folks, you'll recall that we changed our pay plan to where civil service employees will get 2.5% every single year now going forward, as opposed to 2.5% every other year. So this is a great change. So they'll also see a 2% cost of labor plus a 2.5% annual step.
Is the merit increase, is the average or mean 5%?
Typically what happens, we will budget 5, and I think the typical number is it comes in around 4. You'll have some 5, some 4, some 3s, or in that kind of area. It doesn't mean that everybody will get 5%. It's an up to 5% based upon their performance.
All right.
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, quick question. Back on page 21, where we talked about the personnel, 59%. Is it possible that our transfers, the orangey thing, is actually a part, the majority of that is a part of the personnel? So would it not increase from 59 to what, 60 or 61 or something?
It is.
Am I making that up?
No, that's a good observation. So the personnel that we were talking about was always called personnel.
Mhm.
It was just in different places.
Right.
And so the total personnel would still be around 59%,
Okay.
all inclusive.
But the
Transfers are certainly higher.
Yeah. Okay.
And so because these transfers are higher, it'll end up, without the transfers, it would have been a higher number.
Gotcha. Thank you.
But those transfers will have to stay because otherwise the general fund costs go up.
Exactly.
Going back a slide or two, did we skip some maintenance? I noticed that budgeted was $1 million, we're like 600,000 actual, and then projected for 1.4 for FY23.
Okay, right there
Yeah.
is where you're looking.
Yeah.
Let's see. I can find that out. I'm trying to think what caused that. Well, I know what that was. Yes, I know what that was. So this decline, that's what you're referring to there, right? We budgeted $1 million and it's coming in around $5. We deferred street maintenance for fiscal 22. Because of the cost, we expected to be astronomical, and we could get less streets done for the same amount of money. So instead, what we did is, you see this right here, corresponding thing right there. So the 650,000 that we had budgeted as street maintenance, we've moved to a capital project fund, which is part of that 1.3 million that you see right here in transfers. So basically that cost moved from maintenance to transfers. Still doing it. We're setting aside for fiscal 23. So we're going to have a huge program in 23. It's for street maintenance. It won't just be the $1 million or something less than that. It's going to be the $1 million plus the 650,000 that we're putting in there, plus some art money that $1.5 million, I think we put in art money that we could put in there. Plus, what was it? 13th and College that we might put in there. We're going to have
North College.
we're going to have a huge street maintenance, put it out on the street, and we'll probably get some very good bids because that project is going to be huge.
Cool.
Were we overwhelmed or just wanted to delay or thought prices were coming down?
Prices are extraordinary.
Yeah, price estimates were just so high that we just didn't think it was a good value to spend the money now. It's kind of wait and see what the market does, and maybe we'll benefit from that. But regardless, we're not going to skip 2 years. We're going to get out there and add more money to it in order to have an effective street maintenance program.
Thank you.
The lumber prices have started down. Do you think any of the street construction price might go down?
So much of it is petroleum.
For bidding Heritage Park this week, basically. So that may be an indication of some of the bidding prices and see if there's some adjustment in that. We have multiple components, so we'll see a lot of different things that way.
I'll just add a component on the price there was, we were $9.50 a square yard for our last street maintenance plan. And we were seeing prices well over 25 to 30 on all. And so that's when we discussed about the dollars we had allocated, whereas we were going to do about a third of the streets that we could have done. And now going forward, we may have a very competitive outcome with the monies behind College and then South Pearl, as well as also a street that's being discussed as well.
So with so much allocated towards streets, it might make sense to scale back the hair, delay that to the next year on the budget. Just perspective. An extra 600,000.
We can talk about it now. Honestly, it's because this builds the proposed budget that I'm bringing back. So do you want to have that discussion real quick on 850 versus 1 million? Otherwise, I would bring back the 1 million.
And
that we
Mike,
had.
that accounts for some of the revenue in excess from last year you're carrying over. How does that fit in?
The revenue that we're making, that we expect to make in 23 rolls into that fund balance. But remember, the fund balance percentage
You keep
is
it at
still
30.
right at that 30%. I don't have a whole lot of that to give, I guess is what I'm saying. So it's because of that. I mean, that's where it's going to sit.
But we haven't spent, if we hold off on doing the streets, that's still dollars that aren't spent. They're saved.
Correct.
But if we had to scale back, that's dollars that aren't gone. There's still flexibility.
That is true. We could budget it. And then if the contract, if you want to have a lesser contractor, we could do that too. Nobody said you had to bring back a contract with that $1 million in it.
I'm concerned about the labor because we're just seeing such extraordinary costs of living. If you're just going to buy the same thing next year you bought this year.
Yeah.
It's going to cost you, 5 to 8% more.
We did ask our consultant about that to get her feel on what would a reasonable, now this was a few months ago.
Yeah.
Not when she was first here. This was like 2 months ago that I called and sent an email and said, what seems reasonable now? What are you seeing as a cost of labor adjustment? Because normally she says 1%. She goes, it's definitely not 1. She said 3 is maybe more correct if you can afford it. 2 is kind of where we landed, just kind of as an in between. 1 is definitely too low. It's not even point doing. You could could you make that 8? Well, that's some of that's budget constraints, right? But she was saying in that 2 to 3% number is about what she's seeing, and this is nationwide, for kind of cost of labor. Now, that's definitely not keeping up with inflation the way it is now.
We're doing more now.
I don't know how she's, I don't know where she's coming, that number's coming.
Yeah.
Now, when I look at what they're doing for the military, what they're doing for the federal employees, what the Social Security is doing, that doesn't track.
It
Right.
might be worth revisiting with her and just
Okay.
talk about it. Maybe we're headed closer to a 3 or something beyond that.
The reason, the numbers the Pentagon's floating are closer to 5. The highest in
Yeah. And, but,
maybe ever.
and remember too, though, I mean, along with that, the cost of labor adjustment is not the only increase that an employee would get. So in this,
But
even this
that's-
particular
but-
scenario, it
But
may be
if
a,
you keep- If you keep the same thing, if $100, if you're gonna buy $100 worth of stuff,
that's right.
you know, you gotta keep the playing field level, and then when a merit raise, okay, that's a merit raise.
Yep.
But if I'm gonna buy the same stuff, what does that take?
Yeah.
Very
Agree.
good- Very good point. Very
We
good
will
point.
certainly
And
talk about
Council
that.
made a huge commitment in the compensation study, and we don't want to fall backwards.
No.
Try to stay as current as we can.
Anything to add, Charlie?
Well, I mean, I would say that I'm not sure that how.
Just don't.
Oh.
The only thing I would add to that is the timeframe when we actually got with, what's her name, Lori Messer, because that was certainly not due to the most recent issues we've had with inflation. It may have been a little bit prior to that.
Mhm.
So that increase may, since we process of asking, I don't remember exactly the date.
I can make a phone call tomorrow.
Yeah.
Please.
Okay. Moving on, personnel. So we did add 2 positions, as Sam mentioned, for 23, a deputy court clerk. I'd like to add a deputy court clerk to have a dedicated, an additional dedicated court person. Right now, we have a court administrator, and then my staff, that's the customer service reps, to kind of share in that duty of, and court is so specialized, and the knowledge set that you have to have for proper processing. We really need a dedicated deputy court clerk position here at the city. The second one, the peer network director, we already have. It's just not budgeted in 21. We did it a mid-year thing. And so I'm adding it in 23. So you'll see that increase, even though he's already here, he's already being paid, already on payroll.
I thought he came with money from the state.
No, it is a completely grant-funded position. It's just not in the FTE count.
Okay, thank you.
And then we mentioned the reclassification of a recreation superintendent, and you asked how much that person was going to make, and I can lead direct that.
I looked at that, Mike. It was 63,890. 63,890 is what you put in the budget calculator.
Okay, 63,890.
63.
And that's all in, or is that pay, just pay?
I'll have to look at that.
Sounds like that's an all-in number.
Well, I hope not.
It's budgeted.
That says it's under total 63,890.
Yeah, so that's all in. That's including,
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Totals, if you go all the way over,
Yeah.
83,
okay, 83
114.
with benefits. So 63
with
probably is
everything.
the estimated pay rate. Okay, yeah, for superintendent, that's probably right. Okay. Any other personnel discussions you want to have before we move on? Okay,
I know you're gonna get to this at some point, but heard anything about health insurance rates? You talk about personnel, that's a huge chunk.
I'm sorry, what was the?
Health insurance.
Anything about health insurance possible?
I think we meet next week with our consultant to kind of have that discussion. I don't think we'll get the real rate until closer to budget time, like September. And then we'll have to kind of clarify that.
The January 1 effect on the budget.
I'm afraid it's gonna be substantial. That's why I was asking the question.
I hope not, or I have some adjustments to make.
I hope not too. Just-
Fuel costs, we did have a substantial increase, just 15%, I think it was this past year. So maybe we'll get lucky. Fuel costs are going up. I'm having to increase fuel in the general fund by about $45,000. It's causing supplies to go up. Here again is our $1 million for street maintenance. We can decide if that's the appropriate amount. Or like I said, the way it is now, I have it in the preliminary budget. We can talk about that as we get closer. And then again, as I mentioned, refuse collection revenue goes up also, so do the expenses. That's essentially a pass through. Okay, IT services for the general fund goes up. These are charges from our internal service fund. Part of the reason that that's there is that new position in the IT fund. The general fund absorbs about 80% of the IT budget. And so that's why that cost is increasing. We'll get to that in a little more detail. Much like the other personnel costs that I'm trying to kind of add some transparency to, we've had for years, have carried our city attorney, municipal judge, and prosecutors pay under our personnel category, and it doesn't belong there. It actually belongs as legal services in the services category. So I'm pulling it out of personnel, putting it where it belongs. And capital wise, I've got 120,000 in the budget to replace all of the windows in this building, as well as installing a gazebo in the front to hopefully increase some events that happen here at Harris. There's also $25,000 to replace an EKG monitor in fire that makes up that 145,000. Moving then on to transfers. So let's talk about this one a little bit. Transfers for equipment replacement funds grows by $327,000 to just over $1 million. So you'll recall from our conversation back in April that after we talked to department heads and we readjusted the schedules to based upon need, not based upon some random funding buildup timeline, that we were significantly short in funding to get to when these items are going to be replaced. We have some higher dollar items that are coming quicker than we expected. City Council's desire was to keep funding it, everything, all of the assets. But if you could then kind of minimize the jump or smooth out that jump from 23, then that's what you would like me to do. So what I did was this 327 that you see, that increase there, is actually 75% of our annual contribution to our equipment replacement funds, which still gets us closer. So if you wanted that to be 100% of our annual contribution, I need to add another $325,000 to that number. So what the plan for me is, I'm going to budget 75% of our annual transfer in 23. I'll budget 100% in 24 and 125% in 25. And that kind of has a smoothing effect to get us to where we'll have enough money when we need it, but it's kind of smooths that effect. Otherwise, I'd have to have, like say this, it should be a $600,000 increase in 1 year. And that's not the direction that you gave. Just like the general fund has some changes, had the $700,000. There's $193,000 of general fund people that need to pay the water and sewer fund. So we're transferring that over. We have a $30,000 capital project for the PD parking lot. And then 40,000 we have budgeted as a transfer to the grant fund in the event that we get a COPS grant that we applied for. If we get the grant, we could add another police officer. If not, there's no person added in the FTE count. But so I'm budgeting the cash match in the event that we get that grant.
Mike, can you explain real quick? I don't want to go labor. The transfer for water and sewer to reflect changes to the payroll allocation.
Okay, so remember on the general fund side, I used Sam Listy as an example.
Right.
Where I was taking Sam's salary and the water sewer fund was paying some of that and the drainage fund was paying some of it. This is the same thing in reverse. This is Matt Bates, who is now residing in water and sewer as a director of public
So you're
works.
just putting it where it belongs.
I'm putting it where it belongs.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Thank you for shortening my answer.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Well, when I get it, I'll let you know.
This is all I have on the general fund. Before we move on, is there anything else you want to discuss in the general fund? We can always come back. Okay. Hearing no comments, we'll move on to the debt service fund. Okay, got some problems here, guys. So at the direction of council, we have been trying to essentially maintain a zero balance in reserves in the debt service fund. We've just kind of kept nothing there. And the problem with that philosophy is in times such as fiscal 22, where we might under collect revenue. Remember I said revenue, property tax revenue is coming in short. Just like in the general fund side, there's a debt service component to that. And if we're not going to collect everything that we budgeted, we may end up fiscal 22 as a deficit of $43,000. I cannot have a deficit in this fund at the end of the year. I just can't. I don't mean that philosophically. Auditors are going to cream me if I do. So what if it does? Hopefully we'll catch up. If we don't, we're going to have to do some sort of transfer at the end of the year to cover that deficit from the general fund, probably. So that's
And that's temporary, and we make that up with the debt service rate, right? The next year
for
for 2023.
The
Add a cushion.
you don't get to, it doesn't work that way. So again, remember I said you can't jack with the collection rate now, the debt service rate, the amount of debt, the amount of revenue, the tax rate that's required to raise enough revenue to cover your debt payments is just that. It's the rate that's required to raise enough revenue to pay your debt. Making up a difference like that, I could not put into that calculation. So what we'll end up doing is just transferring it, make it zero. And then in 23, we'll have a little bit more if it all worked out right, we'll have 14,000 more in revenue than expenditures.
A couple years ago, we didn't lower the debt service rate and increase the M&O rate.
A few years ago we did, and we could play that game. I can't do it any longer.
So there's been a change.
Correct.
Yeah, but we've done it.
Correct.
Yeah.
And we did it then because that was the last chance we had to do it. Part of the reason, part of the
Yeah.
consideration.
It's all the same money. It comes in. If I increase in the general fund, I'm getting in the general fund, but I still got the same amount of debt service to pay. So I'm just moving it from the general fund into the same fund. It's just a juggling act is really all that is. Anyway.
But that's just a surprise from the collection rate, nothing that we did in setting.
That's
our
correct.
debt service
Absolutely.
rate.
Nothing that we did. It's just the collections are, and it may not come in like this. I'm just looking at where my projections are. If we collect, if that increases in the next couple of months, we may not be in that negative position. But what I'm saying is if we are, I have to do something because I can't.
I tell you what, the possible impact to a school district is really significant if that collection rate drops significantly. There's a lot of ripples associated with that. Because I know their collection rate's at 100% now.
Absolutely.
So if our collection rate goes back up to 98 plus like it has been.
What happened is essentially, what it does is it's going to change the rate. So if the collections are better, then my rate can be high, can be lower because I'm going to collect a higher share of that rate.
Right.
If a lower, all you're doing is affecting the rate. But yes, technically, like if they're this short, this is actual collections, which is exactly what Councilman Holmes is referring to. If my debt service fund is coming in short, I suspect theirs might be as well. And that can be problematic. Yes, absolutely. It may not come in this year, but it's going to come in later. That's right. That's another kind of misconception when you talk collection rate. If you look out 2 years, our collection rate is like 99.9%, just as John mentions. You will collect it generally, but maybe not in that first year.
But you'll have to cover this.
That's correct. Yeah, the budgetary, I need to do that. That's right.
Okay.
Absolutely. So the amount of debt that we have here in 23 is $9.4 million of tax supported debt. We did have a 2002 issuance that rolled off in 2022. Graphically, those payments over the next several years looks like this. Even though I have some maturities happening in this time period, we're going to maintain payments of 1.2 million out till like 2028. And then it'll fall off slightly and then take a big drop here in 2031. That's if we don't issue any additional debt, but that's just what it looks like. Moving on to our internal service funds. So the IT funds would bring in $1,065,000 and $928,000 worth of expenditures. Most of its money in the IT fund goes towards maintenance. That's software maintenance, all that kind of computer stuff that only Chris Brown cares about.
It doesn't work.
Yeah, except if it doesn't work.
We carry that one at Dunmore.
So the big, on the personnel side, one of the big drivers to the IT budget is the addition of one IT analyst position. I think all in, taxes, benefits and all that numbers around $74,000 of that 89,000. We bought computers in 22 that we don't need to buy in 23, so supplies goes down. And then in capital outlay, we're going to buy $71,000 of computers in 23, and there's $50,000 for a mobile audio solution and trail cameras. Mobile audio solution is basically a sound system on wheels and a cart that's primarily for this building. Probably a good addition to this building.
Trail cameras?
I'm sorry.
What are the trail cameras for?
Trail cameras are, I don't know where trail cameras are going. 23 trail cameras.
They're installed out on this segment of the trail. And they're gonna be added from Second Avenue on.
Perfect. Okay, thanks. I like it. Appreciate it.
Our building maintenance fund for 23 would bring in 489,000 of revenue with expenditures of 416,000. Most all of its costs go towards personnel. Not a whole lot happening here as far as significant changes. The cost of labor adjustment and merit increases, and then maintenance costs go down after we did some work at the fire station this year. Looking forward to our hotel motel tax fund. Revenues for 23 at 288,000 with expenditures of 160,000 will grow their reserves to $681,000 at the end of 23. Expenditures, 62% of that is related to this, what we have, it's grouped as other expenses, but that's primarily tourism support, visitor center support, things like that. 92,000 of that is support for our events and tourism that we have. Tax revenue for the hotel motel tax fund is expected to grow around 10%. That's the current growth rate that I'm projecting. I'm just carrying that forward into 1 year. Again, tourism sponsorship grows to $92,000 and visitor center support is $12,500.
Is the rate for the revenue reserve the same as all as the other funds, the 30% or?
We don't have anything specifically for these funds because quite frankly, if it's not there, you don't spend it. And there's not a big
growing year to year.
Correct. There might be a point when you say, hey, we need to find something to do with that large balance.
But, you know, 682,000 in the hotel tax fund projected at the end of next year seems like a pretty good chunk of change that we should be investing.
I agree.
In tourism, hotel, you know.
Yes, there has been a contribution for the standpipe project that the hotel motel tax fund made a couple of years ago. That's not, I mean, there's no big projects like that I'm aware of coming, but we could certainly use some of that funding for those type of projects. Or get very aggressive with our advertising.
Yeah, there's an array of things that could be spent on, but that might be better discussed in a workshop or something.
Yes, ma'am.
Imagine Belton opportunities.
Absolutely.
Could capitalize on some of those dollars.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on to our special revenue funds, the TERS we'll start with. The TERS board has already approved its budget of $3,029,000 of revenue and $2,630,000 of expenditures, growing its reserves to $1.3 million. Again, as I had said before, it looks like the TERS values may increase by $314 million or increase to 314, which would be a 27% increase in this tax year. A couple of things here. So I have to create a budget based upon some expectations of revenue here. And so the revenue that you'll see shortly is based upon that 5956, a contribution from the city at that, based upon the values here. And then I have this county rate of 36.8 is today's tax rate for the county, which they will not likely be able to maintain. Just like we have such downward pressure on our rate from 63 to 59. They're going to have the same thing on that 36.8. So what I'm showing you in revenue here is not likely to come in, at least for their aspect, their percentage there. But again, because there's such net income, a large amount of net income, I'm not overly concerned if we don't make that $3 million budget with revenue. On the expenditure side here, expenditures grow by $420,000 in the TERS. Couple of things here, that's mostly transfers. You see that 552, but debt service also went down by 136,000. Remember I said we had something mature. We had a 2002 issuance mature in 2022, and that rolled off, leaving only this. I'm sorry, I was wrong about that one. That was like a 2017 issue that matured. But all that's left in the TERS is $255,000 in debt, and that rolls off in 23. And so then they'll be debt free. In the TERS fund, there's $95,000 worth of grants, facade grants that have already been kind of approved, recognized in the process. These are those things there. But we decided to add, to round up, if you will, by $24,000 to make it, to put an additional money in there in the event something else came along, not just the stuff that we already know about. So the facade grant budget in TERS is actually $120,000.
Mike,
yes, ma'am.
that left 23,000 for all of fiscal year 2023 for something new to come along.
That's correct. That 24,000. You know, $20,000 facade grant would eat that up pretty quickly. This is an easy budget to amend. Again, because there's not much that happens in this fund really, other than these few things. It's real easy to do an amendment to do that. That we would not let that stop us from awarding a facade grant.
Thanks.
And actually, they're sometimes done well in advance. The approval is. Transfers here. There's very large transfers that you see. This will be transfer from the TERS operating fund into the TERS capital project fund for these projects. 1.2 million for Connell, Southwest Parkway, and then renovation at the library. The TERS also pays for a portion of the retail development coordinator position as well. Moving on into EDC. EDC's budget has also been approved by their board with revenues of 3.1 million and expenditures of 1.9, increasing fund balance by $1.1 million to nearly $8 million at the end of 2023. Let's see. So the big driver there obviously is sales tax revenue, increasing by that same 10% that I've budgeted on both sides. The expenditures have grown significantly by $1.2 million. The most significant one is this transfer here that I'll share with you. Let's see what I got. Again, sales tax revenues up. There on the personnel side, EDC plans to make their part-time administrative assistant position into a full-time administrative position, which costs around $57,000. But the chamber has agreed to kind of pay a portion of that salary. So there's some additional revenue coming in to offset that increase. The total increase is not that much. And then BDC's board has agreed to provide $1.3 million for the South Pearl East Avenue J Street reconstruction. This is what's the bill? Is it Norman's? Yes, it's that Pearl. That's sort of a road, sort of a gravel trail from the 1800s, and that'll fix that project. So in summary, best way to end the budget, right? Growing revenues are good. Sales tax is going to go up as well. We have 2 FTEs plus that city match for an additional police officer if that comes in. We've implemented the comp study. We have this 2% for a COLA and 5% for a merit included in the budget. Street maintenance funding, we have currently at $1 million. That's the number we've always tried to reach. Equipment replacement funds, again, we're covering those to meet our future needs, but it is just slightly less than it's not 100%. Debt service is good. IT fund is also going to add a position. Hotel motel money keeps coming up, and significant capital projects funding for EDC and TERS. So what have we left to do? Well, we have just a few things now. We're getting closer. So at your next council meeting on July the 12th, I'm going to bring forward your capital improvements program for the next 5 years, 2023 to 2027. We're going to do a fee schedule presentation maybe on the 26th. That might actually move to the 12th. I can't remember the date that we have that. On August the 9th is when we kind of have planned. We'll bring forth the proposed budget. We'll also have to propose a tax rate at that time. Around the 25th of July is when Belcad will give me the certified roll. So then we can really calculate what our rate's going to be to build our budget. Remember, the way this works is I'm building revenue, but your budget builds your tax rate. So the revenues that I have, I'm capturing from property taxes, then we'll see what tax rate will get us to that number. And that's what I'll bring forward as a recommendation for a proposed rate. September 6th, we'll hold public hearings, and September 13th is when we'll adopt all this stuff. And I'll get to take a day or two of vacation.
July 26th, will that be when we set our water and sewer rates?
I would probably bring water and sewer back on this September meeting, one of these September meetings, unless you tell me otherwise. Again, the revenues are there or that are in the budget. If you adopted a rate that doesn't bring that in, would just end up being less money or more money than what we have in the budget.
We're proposing to bring the fee schedule to you in either late July or the first meeting in August, with the adoption of that not occurring until September 6th. That's the adoption of the fee schedule. So same time or just before the adoption of the budget.
And just curious, Mike, I know you may not have this at your fingertips, but a penny of assessed tax?
An extra penny brings in around $150,000, 140, 150. So that's where that 3-cent delta, if you, the no new revenue rate versus the voter approval rate is that $450,000, $425,000 in additional revenue to cover these things that we've talked about. Make no mistake, this budget goes up a lot, but it does. We're not doing anything frivolous. We're really meeting some needs, and by doing what we're doing.
And what does 1% COLA cost?
The 2% I think was a 176, so half that, 85,000 maybe, if you did another one.
So if you even went to 5%, that's still 400%.
Yeah. Yeah, the only downside to that is once, you know, that's moving everybody's pay up, and that 5 is going to compound as we go out. Not disagreeing with you one bit of whether 2 is insufficient, but there is a carryover effect of doing that. One thing I do need to ask, and I know the answer, but I need to ask it. I mentioned voter approval rate. Does council have any desire to adopt a proposal rate that's greater than the voter approval rate?
Nope.
If you do, I need to know that, because I got to hustle and get a proposed budget in your hands on July the 12th. Because that's 30 days before we would have to adopt in August.
I don't see a need to do that.
No, that'd be revenue in excess of 15%.
Yeah.
No, I'm good.
I thought that was going to be the answer. I just needed to ask that in the event there was some thought there, because I will tell you, and from this point forward, we won't be able to do that. Any other questions or comments for the proposed budget or preliminary proposed budget?
Yeah.
We'll work on some of these things and bring them back to you.
Thank you. Well done.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Mike. That's a lot of information to think about and chew on for a while. Any other comments or questions from council? That being the case, we are adjourned at 8:09 PM. Thank you, everybody. Good meeting.